Hello, hello. Great to see so many of you have joined us for the session with Onyi Anyado. Welcome, Onyi. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Rita. How are you doing?
Very good. So Onyi is a UK-based leadership speaker, a corporate trainer, author, among other things. He's going to talk about leadership today, and I recommend you listen and really closely, and I am sure you will agree with me that he's a really great speaker. I've been in one of his talks before. So Onyi, when you're ready, I'll give the stage to you, and I'll be afterwards back for our Q&A. So thank you again, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Rita. Good morning, good afternoon, or shall I say good evening to everyone around the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, as Rita so kindly said, my name is Onyi Anyado, and I'm a UK-based global leadership speaker, corporate trainer, and futurist. So, for my message of cutting edge distinction, I coach and train leaders, senior managers, and organizations around the world on how to lead with their distinction in the 2020s and above. So my life story, my legacy is titled From Detention to Distinction. So I was born in Hackney, East London, the capital of England, 4 parts of London: North London, South London, East London, and West London. So I was born and raised in East London to a 2.4 family, meaning my mom, my dad, my sister, and myself. Unfortunately, at a very early age, my dad left. So for the majority of my childhood years and my teenage years, it was just me, my mom, and my sister. Thankfully, about 10 years ago, after about 25 years, me and my father united on Father's Day of all days. Ladies and gentlemen, it was the most emotional day of my life thus far. Not seeing my dad for 25 years. I mean, I cried. I cried and I cried and I cried. So I went through the education system. So I come from a Nigerian background. So Nigerian parents or Nigerian mothers, they're the strictest in the world. So I had to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a pharmacist. So I went to a good secondary school, a good college. In college, I studied business studies, and I came out with a merit, which was pretty good. Then I went to Middlesex University, which is in North London, to study management and marketing. Again, I didn't really know what I wanted to become, but I was just going with the flow. So unfortunately, when I got to the second year, university was an eye-opener. I loved it. I had so many friends. White friends, black friends, Indian friends, Turkish friends, Chinese friends from all around the world. Unfortunately, when I got to the second year, maybe the latter term of the second year, I dropped out of university and began living a particular lifestyle called the street life. Now, many of you might understand what that means, but it was basically young men on the streets of East London up to no good. Unfortunately, in that period of time, 6 of my friends got murdered and I nearly got shot dead too. So I've lived a very interesting life. So now, fast forward 2021, I'm a UK-based global leadership speaker, corporate trainer, and futurist. And my legacy, my life story is titled From Detention to Distinction. So the title of this keynote is, What's Your Leadership Distinction? What's your leadership distinction? We're now in the era of creative distinction. And as we've seen with COVID-19, the world has changed. The world has been disrupted like never before. And unfortunately, there's going to be even more disruptions. But I believe in this era, which I've called the era of creative distinction, now is the time to locate, leverage, and lead with your leadership distinction. But we first need to establish what leadership is. So please do connect with me on LinkedIn. You see my name there. Feel free to connect with me, send me a note, etc., etc. And feel free to quote me as well on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or Twitter. You may get a special prize. But what actually is leadership? We need to establish what leadership is. So before you can lead with your distinction, you have to understand what leadership is. So in 2015, I said the following: leadership isn't about age, but rather leadership is about influence, impact, and inspiration. Leadership isn't about age, but rather leadership is about influence, impact, and inspiration. So in this era of creative distinction, in a time of continuous disruption, the first person you have to continually influence, impact, and inspire is yourself. I know some of you may be thinking or asking, are leaders born? Are they made? Can I be a leader? Everyone has got the capacity and ability to become a leader. Why? Leadership isn't about age. So it's not how old you are. It's not how young you are. It's not how long you've been in education or in your organization for. Leadership is about influence, impact, and inspiration. And the first person you have to continually influence and impact and inspire is yourself. So that was the first pillar of cutting edge leadership. The second pillar, I wrote it in 2013, and I said the following. Leadership is bringing people into new realms of excellence and challenging them to become distinguished in their chosen field. Leadership is bringing people into new realms of excellence and challenging them to become distinguished in their chosen field. So leadership is bringing people into, so when you first influence, inspire, and impact yourself continually, you can then influence, impact, and inspire and bring them into new realms of excellence and challenge them to become distinguished in their chosen field. So for example, if you're a student, if you're a graduate and you're looking for a job, you now have to identify what's my leadership distinction, which I'll be talking about. And one of them is the ability to not only just influence, impact, and inspire yourself, but influence, impact, and inspire other people. Why? Leadership is a responsibility. Leadership is a responsibility, and it's not actually a bad responsibility. It's actually a good responsibility. Why? If you break down the two words, it's responding to ability. So when you respond to your ability, you're embracing your responsibility. And then when other people respond to your ability, they're now responding to your leadership ability. So leadership is bringing people into new realms of excellence and challenging them to become distinguished in their chosen field. The third pillar of cutting edge leadership is distinction in leadership isn't a mindset. Distinction in leadership is a state of mind. Distinction in leadership isn't a mindset. Distinction in leadership is a state of mind. I come from a Nigerian background, and particularly my mother and my father's generation, the best generation ever, I think, they had a particular mindset that, you have to go to school, go to college, go to university, which is good, get a job, and 25 years, get a mortgage, and then live your life. But we've seen with coronavirus and the global disruption, there's no such thing necessarily as job guarantee. So distinction in leadership isn't a mindset, it's a state of mind, which I'm going to be speaking about later. So for example, if you look at some buildings in Dubai or buildings in your city, one of the things that are keeping them where set is a deep foundation, and it's the concrete and the cement and the pillars. But unfortunately, if your mindset in 2020 and beyond, 21 and beyond, is that of fear, fatigue, and frustration, rather than leadership, legacy, and light, is a mindset. But what is a state of mind? I'll be speaking about that shortly. So distinction in leadership isn't a mindset. Distinction in leadership is a state of mind. And that state of mind can see new opportunities and possibilities. So for example, if you're a graduate, if I was a graduate now, for example, I'll be going to every room, every conference, every networking event, connecting with people on LinkedIn and asking questions. So when I said to you to connect with me, it wasn't just to say, okay, hello, how do you do? It's to ask questions. Because the more questions you ask, the more you can now incorporate a state of mind. So distinction in leadership isn't a mindset. Distinction in leadership is a state of mind. And the fourth pillar, the final pillar for being a leader of distinction, is distinction in leadership isn't about me, myself, and I. Distinction in leadership is about him, her, and them. Distinction in leadership isn't about me, myself, and I. Distinction in leadership is about him, her, and them. Unfortunately, society, particularly here in the West, but I think society as a whole, makes us very selfish, makes us very self-centered. Gimme, 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 my name is Jimmy. If your name is Jimmy, please, I'm not speaking about you. So we're very self-centered. My house, my car, my children, my family, my job, my business, which is important. But I believe to lead with what's your leadership distinction is to become legacy-minded. And guess what? Do you know you don't have to be dead to leave a legacy? So imagine I train and coach senior managers, and now I'm training them to have a state of mind to become legacy-minded. Why? You're not going to be working in that organization forever. You're not going to be in that job forever. So you have to become legacy-minded, where you live your legacy and leave your legacy. So distinction in leadership isn't about me, myself, and I. distinction in leadership is about him, her, and them. And before you can influence him, her, and them, of course, you have to influence you, yourself, and you with influence, impact, and inspiration. So those are the 4 pillars of leadership, cutting edge leadership. So again, what is your leadership distinction? So your leadership distinction comes from, dear leader, your vision is your future. So what do you see? What do you want? And what's your distinction? Dear leader. So everyone I'm speaking to you, you're a leader, because we've established that every single one of you is easy to be a leader now. But dear leader, your vision is your future. So what do you see? What do you want? And what's your distinction? There was an American actress and singer-songwriter, Doris Day, and she sang, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be, the future's not ours to see." I don't believe that. Why? The likes of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg, they've gone to the future, they've created the future, and they've now come back to 2021, and they're selling us the future. So it's so important to understand what's your leadership distinction. You have to be a future thinker, you have to be a fertile thinker, and you have to be a visionary thinker. You have to be a future thinker, you have to be a fertile thinker, and you have to be a futuristic and visionary thinker. So when Doris Day said, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be, the future's not ours to see," the future is ours to see. But the only one that owns the future are those that can see it. So how do you see it? That's why I asked, dear leader, your vision is your future. What do you see? So for example, for today's tech jobs fair in the UK, what do you see? Are you seeing opportunities and possibilities, or are you seeing obstacles and problems? Because guess what? In the obstacles and problems, there you can see opportunities and possibilities. So I really want to challenge you and to ask yourself, what am I seeing today? So what am I seeing, excuse me, for the next 2 months, for the next 2 years, for the next 10 years? Don't be afraid to dream big, but just don't dream big. Dream strategic. So your vision is your future. What do you see? Are you seeing opportunities and possibilities, or are you seeing obstacles and problems? And guess what? Everywhere we look is obstacles and problems, but everywhere we look are opportunities and possibilities. Why? Perception is everything. Perception is everything. Yes, we're in lockdown, or lockdown's easing in some countries. Yes, unfortunately, COVID-19 is spiking in some countries, but everything's online. So if everything's online, that means there's more opportunities than ever before. So dear leader, your vision is your future. What do you see? What do you want? And what's your distinction? So for example, when I first came in a personal development industry a number of years back, I promised myself 2 things. One, I would never call myself a motivational speaker. Nothing wrong with that, but at the time, there were so many motivational speakers saying the same thing. And 2, I would never quote anyone, but rather I'll be constantly be quoted. And now my message of cutting edge distinction is being quoted around the world in universities, in businesses, in business books, on podcasts. So I found my distinction in my distinction. So to find your leadership distinction, you have to find your distinction in your distinction. So if you're a graduate and you're looking for a new job, and they say, tell me something good about you. Don't just say, oh, I'm a hard worker, I'm resilient, I never give up. That's great, but you have to find something different about you that you can now showcase to your organization. If you work in an organization, for example, if you're a senior management or you're an employee, and you're not too sure about your leadership role, begin to read journals and watch videos on all things leadership and identify what your leadership distinction is. And when you find your leadership distinction, guess what you should do? Hide it in a cupboard? No, you should celebrate it and you should showcase it. What's your leadership distinction? We don't know your leadership distinction if you're hiding it or if you're not showcasing it. We'll know your leadership distinction when you're intentionally sharing it with people to inspire and influence them. So dear leader, your vision is your future. What do you see? What do you want? And what's your distinction? There's a distinction between Instagram and Facebook. There's a distinction between Nike and Adidas. There's a distinction between Ford and Tesla. There's a distinction between iPhone and Samsung, even though I like a Samsung. Oh, iPhone's good, but I prefer Samsung anyway, to be honest. But hey, so once you find your distinction in your distinction, you can now begin to celebrate your leadership distinction and then lead with your leadership distinction. So, dear leader, your vision is your future. What do you see? What do you want? And what's your distinction? So another way to find your leadership distinction is to understand that you are a brand. Yes, you are a brand. And I know you've heard it before. You've heard great speakers maybe today or before or on YouTube about that you are a brand. But what actually is branding? So in 2015, and by the way, remember, do quote me on LinkedIn, etc. And by the way, everything I'm saying is my own material. Remember, I'm not going to quote anyone, but always be quoted. So what is branding? In 2015-16, I said the following. Branding is not just a product. It's also a way of life, an idea. Branding is actually leadership. Branding is not just a product. It's also a way of life, an idea. Branding is actually leadership. So branding isn't the mic. Branding isn't the iPhone. You are your brand. And when you understand that you are your brand, you can easily walk in leadership. But what is leadership? Leadership isn't about age, but rather is about influence, impact, and inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, Onyi. Really interesting, just like I had expected. I hope people stick around, and I think we have a couple of questions right now that we can address. We have a question about, the female side of this. So do you think increasing the female leadership in tech industry would bring more benefit to this industry itself? Maybe we can talk about this in a general perspective, not just in the tech industry, but what do you say, Onyi?
Oh yes, 100%. I mean, any industry, particularly now in the era of creative distinction, where it's just, for example, male-oriented, excuse me, some of the ideas will be very stagnant and stale. But when you bring fresh ideas, particularly for women, and women are always innovative and creative, oh yes, they can actually bring something new to the table, something cutting edge, something distinguished. So I think that has to be encouraged all the way around, 100%. Yeah. But may I add, if you're a female,
Great.
if you're...
Go ahead. You wanted to add something to that, or can we go to the next question?
If you're a female leader, don't shirk away, or don't be shy or embarrassed, or don't try and play down your leadership distinction. Be proud of your leadership distinction in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have some other questions over here. Let me go to this other one. Leadership can be seen or felt as dominating nature by others. Any tips to avoid this dominating effect that leadership might bring?
Fantastic.
What would you say?
Fantastic question. Yeah, sometimes, I mean, I've had to learn not to be overbearing. So one of the things I've learned is, if you can, speak softly, be more empathetic, and definitely ask questions. Because the more questions you ask, the more the recipient will open up and feel, okay, he or she is understanding me more. So yeah, understand the tone you use, body language, of course, but ask more questions, and that will open up the person to become more comfortable and relaxed.
Mm-hmm. A third question, maybe the last, due to our time constraints. Apart from the top-tier organizations, why do most mid-sized organizations don't emphasize on leadership ability when hiring or grooming future leaders? Instead, normally they look at past accomplishments and qualifications. What would you say?
That's a fantastic question. And that's why, another reason why I said now we're in the era of creative distinction. COVID-19 has changed everything. So now organizations are going to have no choice but to hire people, not just on qualifications, but on their leadership distinction. And once they understand that someone may not have the best qualifications, but they're a fantastic leader, their attributes and their significance can rise even more. So, I think definitely over the next 3 to 5 years, more emphasis is going to be on leadership and leadership development and leadership distinction.
Great. This is great. Let me see if we can still pick up a very last question. Let me go to the chat a little bit. Dominance, we already went through that. Is there anything you would like to, as a tip or anything you would like to address or give to our audience in terms of achieving these leadership goals, practical things that they can do? Anything just to wrap up our session in 1 minute?
Yes, continue to ask questions, read, watch inspirational videos on thought leadership, connection, but also create. Connection, but also create. Become a creator, create your ideology, create your leadership distinction, and continually, share your leadership distinction across social media, etc., etc., etc.
Great. Thank you again, Onyi. We cannot thank you enough. It's great. Thank you to the audience as well. It was a great panel session. I am going to say goodbye to all of you now. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.